You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. A dry crackle, like bones snapping underfoot, shattered the forest's hush. It arrested my motion instantly. A frantic drummer took up residence beneath my ribs as my gaze swept the tangled verdure, hunting the source. Then, materializing from the dappled gloom, a small figure. A boy, perhaps 8 summers old, favoring one leg, his mud-streaked face a canvas of flowing tears. In that suspended moment, I couldn't fathom this child was the harbinger of a darkness that would cling to my memory for years. My name is Elias. For much of my life, the wild trails have been my sanctuary. This expedition, however, was meant for shared joy, a weekend respite carved out with my closest companions, Lena and Kale. We'd sought out an unfrequented path deep within the mountain range, far removed from the well-trodden circuits. The allure was potent, untamed wilderness, the promise of profound quietude. Had we possessed foresight, we'd have known what truly lay coiled within those ancient woods. We'd been pressing onward for some 4 hours when the sound first brushed against our hearing. Faint, ethereal, almost mistakable for wind, sighing through pines or the cry of some unseen creature. Yet, as we navigated the descending trail, it sharpened, coalescing into something undeniably human, saturated with distress. "Do you hear that?" Lena murmured, her brow knitting with a familiar professional concern. Kyle, ever decisive, merely nodded, already angling off the defined path toward the plaintive sound. "Sounds juvenile. We ought to investigate." That was when he stumbled clear of a colossal, gnarled oak, small-boned and slight, clad in torn, earth-stained garments. His left leg dragged, a subtle punctuation to his pained gait. Tears and grime warred for dominion on his young face. "Oh there," I offered gently, closing the distance with deliberate slowness. "Are you all right? Where are your people?" The boy's lower lip quivered, words catching in his throat. I took a tumble. My leg throbs. I can't find the way back to them." Lena knelt swiftly beside him, the healer intersurfacing as she assessed the injured limb. "Doesn't appear fractured, but weight-bearing is unwise. He requires aid." Kyle, meanwhile, was delving into his pack, procuring the first aid supplies. "What do they call you, son?" he asked. "Finian." The boy sniffled. "Please, can you help locate my family? They'll be frantic." Our eyes met, Lena's, Kale's, mine. A silent pact forged in that shared glance. Assisting was immutable. How could we refuse? "Don't you fret, Finian," I reassured him, attempting a calm I didn't wholly feel. "We'll reunite you. Can you recall where you last saw them?" Finian gestured deeper into the woods, away from the relative safety of the trail. "We made camp yonder, near a great stone that looks like a bear resting." A cold filament of doubt threaded through my gut. Establishing camp off trail, particularly with a child, courted risk. I suppressed the thought. The immediate imperative was this boy's reunion. With Lena providing support on one side and Kale on the other, We embarked into the denser woods, following Finian's guidance. I moved ahead, my trekking pole parting the thick undergrowth. As we progressed, Finian recounted his family's excursion, how he'd strayed exploring and become disoriented. His narrative seemed to subtly shift with each iteration, minor inconsistencies surfacing, but I attributed it to trauma. Fear often tangles memory, especially in the young. Perhaps 20 minutes had elapsed when a profound wrongness settled over me. The woods had fallen unnervingly still. No birdsong, no scuttling of unseen life in the leaf litter. Only a heavy, watchful silence. "Friends," I began, my voice hushed. "Does this feel off to you?" Before either could respond, Finian piped up. "We're nearly there, just beyond that stand of trees." We pushed through a dense screen of pines and emerged into a compact clearing. Dominating its center was a large rock formation, undeniably ursine in its silhouette. Yet, the scene was devoid of any human trace. No canvas shelters, no blackened fire ring, nothing to suggest recent habitation. "Finian," Lena began, her tone gentle but firm. "Are you certain this is the spot?" The boy nodded with emphatic insistence. "Yes, this is it. They must be searching. Papa, Mama, I'm here." His cry reverberated, strangely amplified in the stillness, seeming to ricochet off every sentinel tree. Then, from the clearing's far edge, came an answer. Not the relieved calls of anxious parents. It was laughter, frigid, grating laughter that raised the hairs on my neck. 3 men stepped out from the concealment of the trees. They bore the look of hard living, tangled beards, eyes like chips of flint. Each cradled a rifle, held with the nonchalant proficiency of long acquaintance. "Nicely done, Finn," one addressed the boy, his voice a low rumble. "Brought us some fine prizes." Ice water sluiced through my veins as the awful truth crystallized. Finian wasn't lost. He was the lure. "What is this?" Kyle demanded, instinctively maneuvering Lena and the boy behind him. The apparent leader, the one who had spoken, offered a smile utterly devoid of warmth. "What this is," he stated flatly, "is you folks relinquishing all your equipment, your currency, any valuables. Then perhaps if you play nice, we might just let you walk away from here." I felt Lena's fingers clamp onto my arm, a desperate anchor. My thoughts scrambled, seeking an escape from this sudden nightmare. We were outnumbered, unarmed. Our phones showed no signal bars this deep in the wilderness, utterly isolated. "All right," I conceded, striving to keep the tremor from my voice. "All right, take what we have, just nobody needs to get hurt." The leader gave a curt nod to his companions, who advanced with predatory leers. As they started pawing through our backpacks, my gaze locked with Kale's. He gave a fractional, almost imperceptible nod. Years of friendship forged a silent language between us. He had conceived something. It detonated in a heartbeat. As one of the men reached for Lena's pack, Kyle bellowed, "Run!" Simultaneously, he shoved the man with explosive force. The bandit staggered, colliding with his cohort. We wasted no fraction of a second. We fled, plunging into the underbrush, directionless, heedless of the terrain. Distance was the only objective. Rifle reports cracked behind us, slugs splintering bark mere inches away. Lena cried out, a sound of pure terror. and I seized her hand, pulling her onward. "Don't stop!" I yelled above the pounding in my ears. "Keep moving!" We ran until our lungs felt scorched and our legs turned to leaden weights. The sounds of pursuit eventually receded, yet we dared not slacken our pace. Fear lent us velocity we hadn't known we possessed. Finally, after an eternity that was likely less than half an hour, we burst onto a rough dirt track. In the distance, the blessed sight of a small, isolated gas station shimmered like a mirage. Gasping, we stumbled into the fluorescent-lit store. The attendant's eyes widened at our disheveled state. Scratched, filthy, faces etched with panic. "Please," I choked out between ragged breaths. "Call the authorities. We were attacked in the woods." The ensuing hours dissolved into a haze of police questioning and paramedics tending to our superficial wounds. As the adrenaline ebbed, the stark reality crashed down. We had narrowly evaded robbery, or perhaps something far worse. Law enforcement mounted a search, but the men and the boy, Finian, had vanished as if absorbed by the forest itself. They informed us ours wasn't the first account of hikers being decoyed off trail and relieved of their possessions, but the use of a child as bait was a chilling new variation. In the days and weeks that followed, every unexpected noise made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to harbor menace. The forest, once my realm of solace and discovery, now felt fraught with concealed peril. Yet, as time unspooled, I refused to surrender to the dominion of fear. I returned to the trails, cautiously at first, never solo, always with heightened vigilance. I enrolled in self-defense courses, cultivated a sharper awareness of my surroundings. The ordeal reshaped me, instilling caution, yet paradoxically deepening my appreciation for simple kindness. Because for every individual capable of inflicting harm, countless others stand ready to extend a hand. Thoughts of Finian surface occasionally. Was he a coerced pawn in their cruel game, or a willing participant? A question destined perhaps to remain unanswered. I can only hope that wherever his path led, he found an exit from that life. As for me, the call of the wild persists. But now, when I lace my boots and step onto a trailhead, I carry more than provisions. I carry the acute knowledge of the wilderness's dual nature, its breathtaking beauty, and its potential for danger. Every rustle in the leaves, every twig that cracks underfoot, sparks of fleeting tension. But I push through it, unwilling to let one harrowing encounter extinguish a fundamental part of who I am. The forest may conceal predators, but it also cradles wonders. And ultimately, I choose to seek the wonders, forever mindful of the lesson learned that fateful day. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures in the deep woods are those who walk upright. The city's relentless static had frayed Alara down to her last nerve. She craved severance from the incessant demands, the clamor, the weight of expectation. A sanctuary beckoned, a rented pinprick of a cabin swallowed by leagues of forest, a place deliberately chosen for its deficits. No neighbors, no signal bars, nothing but the respiration of trees. Weeks of scrimping had purchased this fragile promise of solitude, this chance simply to exist, unobserved. The journey itself felt like shedding layers of an old world. Asphalt surrendered to gravel, then to a rutted dirt track that coiled deeper into the arboreal labyrinth, swallowing her car whole. Other vehicles became ghosts, then vanished entirely. When the cabin materialized, a compact structure of weathered timber, it seemed less a building and more a natural outgrowth of the woods. Small, yes, but sufficient. A berth for sleeping, a rudimentary kitchen, a necessary bath. Its porch surveyed an endless tapestry of green and shadow. Perfection, she breathed. That initial day unfurled exactly as envisioned. Her phone remained entombed in her duffel bag, a silent effigy to the life she'd fled. She wandered sun-dappled trails, the profound quiet settling over her like balm. Thought, untangled from the usual knots of distraction, began to flow freely. As twilight bled through the canopy, a modest fire crackled in the pit. Dinner was simple sustenance, eaten under a sky dusted with nascent stars, the wind's sibilance in the high branches, her only companion, later safely ensconced within the cabin's embrace, the lock securely bolted. She succumbed to a sleep deeper and more restorative than any she'd known in months. Dawn arrived crisp and clear, but opening the cabin door revealed an anomaly. There, laid carefully upon the porch floorboards, was a folded slip of plain paper, an errant scrap, perhaps, carried by the breeze. She stooped, retrieved it. The unfolding revealed 5 stark words that hollowed her instantly. I saw you by the fire. A glacial stillness claimed her. Standing sentinel on the porch, note clutched tight, her mind scrabbled for logic. A prank? But who out here in this profound emptiness? She hadn't glimpsed another human since leaving the highway. Her gaze swept the surrounding clearing, probing the dense tree line, finding only shifting leaves and hearing only the indifferent wind. Retreating inside, the click of the lock echoing unnaturally loud, she fought to dispel the unease. A misplaced jest, surely. A neighbor from some unseen homestead, miles distant. It felt flimsy, yet she clung to it, unwilling to surrender her sanctuary so easily. The note disappeared into a drawer. Coffee was brewed, a semblance of normalcy attempted. But the peace had fractured. Every window became a potential vantage point. The porch, a stage she felt reluctant to tread. The woods, yesterday benevolent, now seemed watchful. A snapping twig contracted her muscles. A sudden gust sent adrenaline fizzing through her veins. Yet, always, there was nothing. Just the trees, holding their breath. Nightfall brought a renewed vigilance. Locks were tested, retested. In the suffocating darkness of the cabin, she lay rigid, ears straining against the silence, parsing every nocturnal murmur. Absurd, she chided herself. Overwrought. But the image persisted. Someone, close enough to observe her fire-lit silhouette, close enough to deposit that message unseen. Hesitation warred with necessity the following morning. She couldn't remain barricaded indefinitely. Steeling herself, she unbolted the door and saw it immediately. A second note, this one deliberately propped against the porch railing. An invitation and a violation. Trembling fingers fumbled with the paper. I watched you check the locks. Ice water sluiced through her veins. This watcher, this presence, wasn't merely passing through. They were attentive, close. They had lacquered while she believed herself secure indoors. Again, she scanned the perimeter, a frantic, fruitless search for eyes staring back from the foliage. Nothing but the vast, silent indifference of the wilderness, enclosing her tiny, vulnerable bubble. Back inside, the lock slammed home. Panic began its insidious crawl. Leave? But the car, the treacherous road. Call? Futile, the phone remained stubbornly inert. It's a game, she insisted internally. A cruel, elaborate joke. Yet the dread solidified, a cold stone in her chest. The remainder of the day dissolved into a vigil by the windows, her gaze fixed on the unmoving trees, waiting for a sign, a movement, anything. The woods offered only stillness, punctuated by the occasional rustle of unseen life. Exhaustion gnawed at her as darkness reclaimed the forest, but sleep felt impossible. Propped up in bed, lamplight carving a small circle of defense against the encroaching shadows, she listened. Hours blurred. She must have drifted, finally succumbing, because the first pale fingers of dawn filtering through the window startled her awake. A fleeting moment of reprieve. Perhaps it had been imagined, a stress-induced phantasm. Then, a soft thud from outside, distinct, close, like something gently placed on the porch. Heart hammering against her ribs, she crept to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Another white rectangle lay squarely before the door. She didn't want to know, didn't want to read the inevitable escalation, but compulsion overruled fear. With hands that shook violently, she unlocked the door, snatched the paper, retreated, and unfolded it. You didn't sleep well, did you? Thoughts stuttered, failed, closer, bolder. They'd been right there, perhaps peering through the glass panes as she tossed and turned. The clearing, scanned again with desperate eyes, remained empty, mocking her terror. Enough. This refuge had become a trap. The money, the planned days of peace, all irrelevant now. Escape was the only imperative. She moved with frantic energy, stuffing belongings haphazardly into her bag, clothes unfolded, necessities barely registered. Survival instinct narrowed her focus. Reaching beneath the bed for her hiking boots, her hand grazed something alien. Paper. Crumpled, nestled in the gloom. A sickening lurch in her stomach as she smoothed it open. The script messy, hurried. You look tired. Nausea surged. The air thickened, suffocating. They had been inside. While she slept, vulnerable and oblivious, they had crossed the threshold, moved through her space, left this intimate, chilling observation. The room spun. Packing forgotten. Keys were seized. The lock clicked shut behind her, a futile gesture. She sprinted to the car, the ignition key trembling against the slot. A terrifying pause. Would it start? Then the engine roared, a jarring violence in the quiet dawn. Tires spun on the loose earth as she reversed, wrenching the wheel, fleeing the clearing. Down the winding track she sped, recklessly fast, corners blurring. The rearview mirror became an object of obsession, scanned constantly for a pursuing figure, a watcher emerging from the trees. But there was only the receding forest, the empty, serpentine road. The highway felt like surfacing for air after an eternity submerged. Miles melted away before the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally, her grip on the wheel loosening from its white-knuckled clench. Months have passed. The cabin exists now only as a chilling echo in her memory. The identity of the note leaver, their motive, remains an agonizing blank. She tells herself it was a twisted prank, a meaningless act of intimidation. But the feeling lingers, tenacious and cold, the sensation of being observed, studied. Sometimes in the vulnerable quiet of the night, she feels those unseen eyes again, a phantom presence that followed her out of the woods. She hasn't spoken of the final note, the one found inside. She will never go back. Yet, the image surfaces unbidden. That crumpled paper, the invasive words. And the question persists, a cold whisper in the dark. Are they still watching? Still waiting? "3 weeks this house has held me. Before this threshold, the dead of night was merely silent. A helium balloon, merely an object subject to gravity's eventual win. Now, the silence is suspect, pregnant with the scrape and creak I strain to hear from the ceiling above. And that solitary, buoyant sphere haunts my waking thoughts. Every glance toward the hallway's attic hatch is edged with a disquietude, born from something as trivial, as innocent as a child's party favor. I am 33. Ilara and I took this venerable 2-story structure for its amplitude and agreeable rent. Its countenance is weary, a slender driveway hugging its flank, paint flaking from the porch like sunburned skin, shingles weathered to a brittle memory of their prime. Within, hardwood protests our passage with unpredictable groans. Door frames sag with the ennui of age. And there, interrupting the corridor's flow, sits the small, unassuming portal to the attic, a fold-down ladder affair. Until a week passed, it commanded no curiosity. What allure could dust and cramped darkness hold? Storage, perhaps, for holiday relics eventually, but unpacking held precedence. Procrastination served me well. Ilara possesses an innate orderliness, a promptness with repairs and tidiness. Yet she granted my aversion to spelunking in ancient crawl spaces its due respect. Neither of us breached that upper realm. We claimed the largest ground floor room as our sanctuary. The designated master bedroom upstairs exuded a peculiar staleness, not decay precisely, but an arid ghost of wallpaper paste or perhaps dormant mildew. Whatever its origin, the downstairs air felt cleaner, the choice simple. The weekend following our arrival, we hosted my parents, a modest celebratory meal. Ilara procured a small helium balloon, emblazoned with "Congrats," tethering it to a dining chair, a whimsical punctuation mark for the occasion. Days later, long after farewells and dishwashing, the balloon lingered, nudging the ceiling with surprising persistence. Ilara remarked on the unexpected longevity of such things, eventually snipping its ribbon, setting it free to wander the hallway's currents. A playful ghost, bumping the plaster ceiling as we passed. An amusing, transient decoration. It became an erratic fixture in the passage. One moment near the bathroom door, the next drifting languidly towards our bedroom. No ceiling fans churn the air there. The windows remain sealed against the cool night drafts. Still, helium balloons are capricious dancers, nudged by imperceptible shifts in pressure. Or so I reasoned. It signified nothing. Then came the first fracture in the mundane. A Monday morning, rising early for the commute. Dressing, stepping into the hall, I registered an absence. The balloon was gone. A cursory search through living room, kitchen, our bedroom. The downstairs closet yielded nothing. A shrug. Perhaps it had surrendered its helium heart somewhere unseen, tucked beneath a table. Time pressed. The search was abandoned. Evening reclaimed me, dinner preparations demanding haste. The missing balloon slipped from my thoughts until later, carrying items upstairs to the spare room. Reaching the upper landing, I paused before the attic hatch. A prickle of wrongness, sharp but indefinable. As I turned away, my gaze snagged on something hovering within the dark rectangle of the attic opening. A faint, rounded silhouette perched near the apex of the retracted stairs. I hadn't touched the hatch. My heart began a nervous tattoo against my ribs. Superstition has never been my companion, yet the physics defied reason. How could a buoyant balloon ascend into a sealed space? Retrieving a torch from the spare room, I pulled down the groaning attic door, the folding ladder unfolding like an insect limb. Hesitantly, I climbed. There, suspended in the center of the dusty, Stygian expanse, floated the Congrats balloon. The air hung thick, smelling of aged cardboard and neglect. Cobwebs draped the corners like funereal bunting. Rough-hewn beams forced a crouch. The floor, mere plywood sheets over joists, felt precarious. No breeze stirred, no window gaped. Yet the balloon, still plump with helium, drifted serenely midair. The sole illumination spilled from the weak bulb near the entrance, which I'd flicked on. No other egress. No vents apparent. Nothing. I stood, suspended in disbelief, for a long minute. My hand finally closed around the string, my pulse a frantic drum. Had Alara orchestrated this? A bizarre jest, perhaps? It seemed the only, albeit unlikely, explanation. Gently, I coaxed the balloon back down into the hallway's familiar light. I called for Alara. She emerged from the kitchen, hands full of groceries. "Did you go up to the attic?" I asked. Her expression was pure incomprehension. "No," she replied, a touch bewildered. Why on earth would I go into that dusty pit? I believed her. Her distaste for the attic mirrored my own. Besides, her afternoon had been occupied, while mine was spent at work. She'd been home, yes, but swore she hadn't touched the balloon. Unease coiled within me, though I attempted levity, murmuring about drafts, a flimsy hypothesis given the closed hatch. The evening dissolved into the flickering blue light of television. I sequestered the balloon in the living room, wishing it gone from my sphere. Sleep came, initially untroubled. Then around 3 in the morning, I snapped awake. Above, a sound. Soft footfalls. Scarcely perceptible thuds. Tentative, followed by stillness. 20 seconds crept by. Then more steps. I lay rigid, breath held captive. Alara, a still form beside me. The sound, undeniably like someone pacing, persisted for perhaps a minute before ceasing utterly. My pulse surged, throat tightening. House settling, old pipes groaning. My rational mind offered these weak shields. But the rhythm felt deliberate, human. Courage failed me. I remained entombed in blankets, eyes wide in the dark, listening for a return that never came. Morning found me taut as a wire. I recounted the nocturnal disturbance to Alara. Old houses groan, she reasoned. Temperature shifts work their magic. Call the landlord if it persists. I nodded, unconvinced, the image of the balloon in the attic superimposed over her logic. 2 days passed uneventfully. Then, the second night, the sound returned. Same hour, Same cadence, light, careful steps overhead. This time, a tremor of resolve fought the fear. Heart hammering, I slipped from bed, stood in the hallway, gaze fixed on the shadowed attic door. Utter silence reigned. Alara appeared behind me, sleep muddled. "What is it, Silas?" I whispered about the noise. She listened intently for a moment, heard nothing. "You're letting that balloon spook you," she murmured, guiding me back towards bed. The following evening, resolve hardened. I would inspect the attic myself. Loose boards, an errant creature, raccoons, squirrels, plausible intruders in antiquated structures. Around 8, Alara engrossed in a book downstairs. I braced myself, torch in hand again. I ascended the creaking steps, pushing my head into the thick, stale air. The lone bulb cast weak circles of light. Dust motes danced. A few derelict boxes left by predecessors. Insect husks. All seemed as before. Until my eyes fell upon something near a rough wooden beam. Cautiously, I navigated the precarious plywood floor. A knot formed in my stomach. The helium balloon. Again. Not merely floating this time. It was, tethered. The string looped and knotted securely around a rusty nail protruding from the beam. Just enough slack allowed it a slight mocking sway, but it was anchored fast. Disbelief rendered me immobile. A chill, profound and invasive, spread through me. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Goose flesh prickled my arms. I glanced back towards the hatch. Empty. Alara was downstairs. We lived alone. Words failed me, lodging somewhere between thought and utterance. Who? Why? The questions hammered silently. Forcing movement, I approached the tethered balloon. Reaching for the string, I felt the tightness of the knot against the nail. Someone had deliberately wound it, secured it. My fingers fumbled, then yanked, snapping the string. The balloon bobbed beside me, absurdly cheerful, still inflated. Could it have snagged accidentally? The precision required seemed astronomical. The knot felt intentional. I retreated from the attic with haste, careful not to stumble on the descent. Back in the relative safety of the hallway, I slammed the attic door shut, the sound echoing slightly. My breath came in ragged gasps, sweat cooling on my forehead. Alara emerged from the living room, her eyes falling on the balloon clutched in my trembling hand. "Why do you have that again?" she asked, a hint of exasperation in her voice. I searched her face for any flicker of deceit, finding none. She swore her innocence, reiterated her avoidance of the attic, and I believed her. Deception wasn't Alara's way. Scissors were fetched. The balloon met its swift, deflating end, its corpse tossed into the bin. Closure. Or so I desperately hoped. But that night, the footsteps resumed, lying rigid, straining to hear. The familiar light pacing echoed from above, back and forth, back and forth. A minute, perhaps two. Quietly, I rose, stood sentinel in the hall, staring up at the dark hatch. My heart felt dangerously overwrought, palms slick with sweat. Then silence fell once more. The thought of reopening the attic door was paralyzing. I remained rooted in the dim hallway, fighting for calm. Visions surfaced. A hidden occupant, a squatter secreted away in the dusty darkness. The notion sent tremors through my legs. Call the police? Report what? footsteps? A twice migrated balloon. Weeks into our tenancy, inviting such drama felt premature, especially if a mundane explanation, an animal faulty plumbing, awaited discovery. Daylight brought a renewed, albeit anxious, investigation. I ventured back into the attic, shifting boxes, probing corners, seeking animal signs or hidden access points. Dust, more cobwebs, and an old trunk with a broken latch were my only finds. Lifting the lid revealed emptiness, save for some moth-ravaged fabric scraps and a cardboard folder spilling brittle receipts. No footprints marred the dust, no droppings, no obvious breaches to the outside world, no evidence of habitation. The ensuing days were an exercise in forced normalcy. Work, dinner, mundane conversations with Alara about groceries and bills. But night transformed me into a vigilant listener, hyper-aware of the house's symphony of creaks and groans, the plumbing's gurgle, the wood's expansion, familiar sounds. These footsteps, however, were distinct, measured, patterned. 2 steps, pause. 3 steps, pause. An attempt to capture the sound on my phone proved futile. Awakened around 3 by the familiar rhythm, I fumbled for the device, hit record. But by the time I reached the hallway, silence had descended again. The recording captured only my own ragged breathing, the refrigerator's distant hum. Our landlord, a man allergic to urgency, offered little solace. Old houses make noises, he'd declared over the phone. Expect quirks. The attic vents near the roofline. Screened off, supposedly. Any sign of rodents? No, I'd admitted. Well, let me know if you find anything, he'd concluded, effectively closing the matter. Now, each evening involves a ritualistic check of the attic door, always closed. Sometimes I trace its edges with my torch beam, hunting for gaps, anomalies. Nothing. Alara worries I'm becoming obsessed. Perhaps she's right. Yet the conviction persists. Something is fundamentally wrong upstairs. Last night, the footsteps returned undeniably clear. Placing my hand against the hallway ceiling, I thought I felt the faintest vibration accompanying the thuds. And the trunk. That detail nags relentlessly. I distinctly remember closing its lid after my inspection. Yet yesterday, venturing up once more, I found it wide open, lid pushed back fully. The meager contents, fabric, receipts, looked disturbed, sifted through. My memory isn't failing me, I know what I saw. Rational explanations circle, seeking purchase. A mechanical fault in the roof structure. Vibrations. But the balloon. Twice it migrated. Once it was deliberately tied. Pipes and settling timbers don't knot strings around nails. The balloon is gone, reduced to rubbish. But its spectral presence lingers, inextricably linked to the footsteps in the violated trunk. Alara remains calmer, though my unraveling state concerns her. Sleep offers little refuge. I drift in a state of perpetual vigilance, startled by every innocuous creak, my stomach perpetually clenched. To combat the rising dread, I installed a small padlock and latch on the attic hatch, drilling into the frame myself. Overkill, maybe, but the sight of that brass lock offers a sliver of control. Now, when my gaze inevitably drifts upward in the night, the lock is a small, tangible barrier. If something or someone attempts descent, surely the struggle would be audible. Yet, 2 nights ago, The footsteps whispered again from above the locked door. The sound is now laced with a new layer of impossibility. If someone is trapped up there, how do they move? If they aren't trapped, how did they get in? Or is there another way out I haven't found? Or is it something else entirely, beyond locks and logic? I cling to rationality. Alara suggested a professional home inspection, focusing on the attic and roof. I intend to follow through. Perhaps they'll uncover a hidden entry, evidence of pests, a structural flaw. An answer, any answer, feels preferable to this gnawing uncertainty. If the inspection reveals nothing, then what? The balloon scenario replays endlessly, its inexplicable appearance in the sealed attic, the chilling discovery of it tied fast. The visceral wrongness of that moment refuses to fade. Moving seems the inevitable conclusion when our short lease expires. The cheap rent is a poor consolation for this nightly erosion of peace. Alara, though less haunted, sees the toll it takes. I walk through my days sleep-deprived, a knot of anxiety perpetually tightening in my gut, anticipating the nocturnal rhythm that may or may not begin. Lying in bed becomes an act of intense listening. Every sound amplified, every shadow suspect. Who carried that balloon aloft? Why anchor it to a nail? Why rifle through an empty trunk? I don't know. All I know is the footsteps persist behind a locked door, and pretending they are mere phantoms of an overstressed mind is a luxury I can no longer afford. Perhaps the inspector will find a simple truth hidden in the rafters. Until then, each night finds me staring at the ceiling, waiting, caught between the mundane fear of an unseen intruder and the unnerving possibility of something far stranger. This house, intended as a haven, has become a place where I lie awake, listening for steps that belong to no one I know. Steps that echo from a place that should be empty. October bled into Tuesday night, leaving a chill that bit through my exhaustion. 14 hours wrestling crates at the distribution center. My vertebrae felt fused into a single rod of pain. Passing the kitchen window, coffee halfway to my lips, the backyard floodlight flared, carving the familiar shapes of lawn and fence from the dark. That's when I registered it. An upright vacancy standing stock still at the tree line, precisely where groomed grass surrendered to tangled woods. My hand froze, the mug suspended, tall, perhaps 6 feet, an utter stasis between two skeletal oaks. No discernible features, less a person than a man-shaped tear in the night's fabric. I lowered the mug, the ceramic clicking softly against the counter. Drawn closer to the window pane, I watched as the silhouette executed a subtle withdrawal, merging deeper into the umber between the trees. A frantic drum began against my ribs. My breath fogged the cold glass as I pressed nearer, squinting. Long, distorted shadows stretched from the security lamp, yet the form remained undeniable, half swallowed by the gloom. My phone felt heavy in one hand, the other closing around the dense metal cylinder of my largest flashlight, hefty enough to serve as a bludgeon. Trembling fingers fumbled with the back door latch. Autumn's breath, thick with decay and damp soil, rushed to meet me as I stepped onto the deck, the tread of my work boots echoing unnaturally loud on the wood. Hey! The sound ripped thin from my throat, inadequate in the vast quiet. Private property here. Another step back from the figure, barely a tremor in the dark now, just a condensation of shadow. I thumbed the flashlight on, its beams slicing across the tree line. Nothing but bark, leaf litter, the empty spaces between trunks. My exhalations plumed white. Down the steps I went, the light bouncing erratically. Above, the floodlight hummed, an island of stark illumination, in an ocean of encroaching black. Halfway across the dew-slicked grass, I halted. Every primal nerve shrieked retreat. Then, movement. A fractional shift sideways, always hugging the darkness. My throat constricted. One more step from me, and it slid deeper into the woods, a motion unnervingly fluid, liquid almost. No crunch of leaves, no snap of twigs, only silent, flowing evasion. I retreated, backpedaling until my heels hit the deck stairs, then scrambled inside. The deadbolt clicked home, checked it again. Blinds rattled shut across the house. The rest of that night found me entombed in my armchair, facing the darkened windows, flashlight clutched tight. Sleep was a foreign country. Dawn arrived gray and damp. I scoured the tree line. Dew lay heavy on the grass, yet offered no impressions, no broken stems, no sign anyone, anything, had stood there. The mind plays tricks, I reasoned. Too many graveyard shifts, veins swimming with caffeine, frayed nerves. Wednesday night, however, brought the same ritual. The long hours, the aching spine, the mug warming my hands. I deliberately averted my gaze from the kitchen window, while the microwave droned over a frozen meal, but the pull was irresistible. A glance. It was there. Same place, same profound stillness. My plastic tray of Salisbury steak clattered to the linoleum. The shape remained indifferent to the sound, a stark void against the trees. This time I stayed indoors, a prisoner watching the watcher through the glass for hours. I saw no eyes, yet felt a gaze as palpable as heat. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Each night, the punctual arrival at the yard's edge, the unwavering retreat if I dared approach. My phone yielded only blurry smudges or impenetrable darkness when I tried photographing it. A newly installed security camera captured nothing but ambiguous shadows dancing in the digital noise. My neighbor, Sam, listened with strained patience. Probably just a deer, Elias, he offered, scratching his beard. They freeze up like that in the lights. A deer I knew. Deer had weight, presence, made sounds. This entity moved like smoke and was utterly silent. Sunday prompted a call to the authorities. Officer Reyes arrived, methodical and polite. She walked the perimeter, scribbled notes. Professionalism couldn't mask the look in her eyes, though. The same gentle pity Sam had shown. The poor guy's cracking assessment. She suggested trimming the trees, letting more light penetrate, mumbled something about bored teenagers pulling pranks. But adolescent mischief fades. Teenagers giggle or run clumsily, leave muddy tracks. This presence felt anciently patient, consistent, imbued with a purpose I couldn't fathom. Sleep deprivation began its insidious work. A dropped crate at the depot Tuesday nearly shattered my ankle. My supervisor, concerned, sent me home. I sat in the car, parked in my own driveway for 20 minutes, contemplating the silent tree line before summoning the courage to enter the house. That night, resolve hardened. I would wait it out. Deck chair positioned, swaddled in my heaviest coat, twin thermoses steaming beside me, flashlight heavy in my lap, phone charged. Sunrise or bust. The floodlight clicked alive at 8:43 p.m. I noted the time on my phone, and there it materialized, punctual as a train, between its customary oaks. 2 weeks, and never a deviation from that precise spot. What is it you want? My voice, surprisingly steady now. Fear transmuted into weary frustration. Why are you here? Silence answered. Stillness observed. At 11:17 p.m., a sound finally broke the quiet. A delicate scraping, like desiccated leaves dragged across stone. The figure subtly shifted, and a dawning horror told me the sound originated from it. My knuckles whitened around the flashlight. The scraping intensified. A step forward. For the first time, it advanced, moving towards me. My heart hammered my ribs, muscles coiled, primed for flight. Another step. It cleared the tree line, fully exposed. The security light ought to have rendered it plain, but darkness clung to it, an intrinsic part of its form. A tear in the world, a shard of absolute night granted locomotion. The scraping filled my head, a vibration felt in the teeth. Another step, and another. Halfway across the lawn now. I raised the flashlight, thumb hovering over the switch. It sunk deep. Animal caution stayed my hand. Clarity was not desirable here. I lurched to my feet, the chair tumbling backward with a clatter. My legs trembled. The figure paused. The scraping ceased abruptly, leaving a tinnitus whine in the sudden vacuum. 20 feet separated us in a tense tableau. Then, an arm lifted. The motion was aberrant, unnaturally smooth, unfolding at impossible angles, like time-lapsed botany played in reverse. The limb kept extending, impossibly long, reaching across the grass. I fled, burst through the door, slammed the lock, bolted upstairs, collapsing against my bedroom wall, lungs burning. No more windows that night. Morning found me canceling work, launching into a frenzy of yard defense. More lights, floodlights this time. Brush cleared, lower branches hacked away. Anything to banish the shadows. More cameras, motion sensors, even a low-voltage electric fence. Futile gestures. It appeared that night regardless, standing serenely in its designated spot amidst the newly naked landscape and blinding glare. Cameras recorded only static blips. Sensors remained dormant. The fence hummed uselessly. Something had shifted, however. Now it periodically advanced, always halting mid-yard, always raising that grotesque limb, always withdrawing if I retreated indoors or broke eye contact. My life inverted. Sleep by day, vigil by night. Blackout curtains sealed my bedroom. Caffeine pills became sustenance. Spreadsheets tracked its appearances, movements, the nuances of the scraping. A desperate quest for pattern, for reason. Week 3 saw my employment terminated. Too many absences, too many near accidents. Sam's check-ins ceased. Officer Reyes stopped returning calls. Who could blame them? I heard the fractured desperation in my own voice. Each night, the figure grew bolder, venturing closer before its ritualistic retreat. The scraping sound acquired texture, layers. Whispers seemed embedded within it sometimes, words spoken in a tongue unknown to man. My house became a tomb. Groceries delivered, blinds perpetually drawn. Yet I felt its presence outside, a palpable weight, waiting. The air thickened. The walls seemed to inch closer. 4 weeks dissolved my sanity. Sleep-starved, isolated, marinated in fear, I broke. 3 a.m., kitchen floor cold beneath me, the ceaseless scraping of physical pressure against my eardrums. A decision formed. Cessation, one way or another. Flashlight, coat, deck. It stood waiting, arm already commencing its unnatural unfurling. A deep breath, then forward onto the grass. It held its ground. The scraping crescendoed with each step, popping my ears, blurring my vision's periphery. I pressed on. 10 feet. Details swam into focus, defying comprehension. The darkness wasn't merely clinging. It was the figure, flowing, roiling like black water defying gravity. 5 feet. The arms stretched, segmented. Wrong. The sound consumed all else. Blood trickled warm from my nose. 3 feet. 2. 1. I stopped. Raised the flashlight, thumb finding the switch. The figure lowered its arm. The scraping cut out. Into the ringing silence crept a new sound. Breathing, ragged and wet, but not from the entity before me. From behind. Slowly, I turned. An identical figure stood on my deck, arm raised. Another stepped from behind an oak to my left. One more materialized beside the garden shed. More emerged from the tree line. 2, 5, a dozen, each an impossible silhouette, each extending an impossible limb towards the center. Surrounded, a circle of animated void. The flashlight slipped from numb fingers, thudding softly on the turf. A synchronized step inward from the circle. Another. The scraping resumed, polyphonic now. A chorus of stone and dry decay and something ravenous, echoing from all sides. I squeezed my eyes shut, felt the air stir as those elongated arms reached and waited. Elias? Hey, Elias. Sam's voice, a shocking intrusion. A car door slammed nearby, followed by footsteps crunching on the driveway gravel. My eyes flew open. Gone. The yard was empty, stark under the floodlights. Sam stood at the side gate, clutching a paper bag. "Brought dinner," he called, his tone laced with concern. Phone's been going straight to voicemail. Got worried, man. I scanned the perimeter. Nothing but crickets, the distant hum of the highway. Inside, I rasped, the word alien in my throat. Not safe out here after dark. Sam shot me a peculiar look but followed me in. The deadbolt slid home, checked twice. God, you look rough, he observed, unpacking cartons of takeout. Slept at all? I didn't answer, moving instead to the kitchen window, drawing the blind tight. Looking was unnecessary. I knew they waited, patient in the shadows, waiting for solitude to return. Sam stayed 2 hours. We ate. We spoke of inconsequential things. His job, the playoffs, his daughter's recital. He tactfully ignored my flinches at every nocturnal sound. When he departed, I escorted him to his car, lingered in the drive until his taillights vanished. Then back inside, lock secured, I began to pack. The next morning, I phoned my cousin in Nevada. A spare room, she'd said. Sunshine, concrete, few trees to harbor shadows. Movers took the heavy furniture. I drove west, car stuffed with essentials, refusing to glance back until Illinois was a memory. Months have passed. My apartment complex is stucco and asphalt, baking in the desert glare. East-facing windows greet the dawn. I work days again, stocking shelves in another warehouse. Sometimes the lights stay on all night. I monitor the online news from my old town, searching for reports of disappearances, odd occurrences near the house. Nothing. New tenants arrived last month. The urge to call, to warn, surfaces occasionally, but the words die unspoken. How would it sound? Perhaps it was just stress, exhaustion, solitude twisting perception. My therapist suggests as much. She's likely correct. Still, darkness remains unwelcome territory, and sometimes lying awake in the sterile quiet of my new room, a faint sound reaches me, disturbingly familiar, like dry leaves skittering across concrete just beyond the window. The blinds stay shut. I refuse to look. I refuse to know if anything stands out there, reaching with arms too long. Refuse to know if they followed. Refuse to know if they are still waiting. The memory clings like sea mist, sharp and cold. My van, a weary beast, groaned to a halt where the pitted track dissolved into cliff edge. Above me, thrust against a sky the color of old bruises, the mansion clawed at the air. Wind, thick with the Atlantic's breath, scoured my face. Its windows were vacant sockets. The great front doors remained sealed. A stubborn mouth closed against intrusion. An undeniable presence emanated from the stone and decaying timber. A sentience that seemed to draw me forward, even as I hesitated, observing the fractured flagstones, the paint peeling like sunburnt skin. My task was precise. Resurrect an antique piano, mute for untold years. Silence is the native tongue of my craft. The quiet spaces where resonance is born. Yet the stillness blanketing this precipice felt heavier, somehow ancient and watchful. I pushed against the immense weight of the front door. It yielded with a protracted groan that reverberated down the gullet of a long, shadowed hallway. My own footfalls became intruders, loud and sharp in the stagnant air, thick with the perfume of dust and decay. I lowered my tool satchel to the floor, its leather sighing against the gritty parquet. My gaze swept the cavernous foyer, a grand staircase spiraling into upper gloom, flanked by towering doorways promising yet more emptiness. Faded portraits line the walls, their subjects obscured by time and neglect. Eyes that seemed to follow, yet saw nothing. I paid them little mind. The instrument was my focus. A name, a number. My instructions were sparse, provided by a contact who mentioned the estate's decades of vacancy, the owner's nascent desire to sell, and the hope that a restored piano might sweeten the deal. Deeper within the house's labyrinthine heart, I located it. A vast chamber, its tall windows staring out at the turbulent gray sea, where waves detonated against the jagged rocks far below. There, huddled in a corner beneath a heavy, dust-laden shroud, sat the piano. Scratches marred its dark wooden flanks, yet a preliminary glance inside revealed strings remarkably preserved, gleaming faintly in the gloom. I lifted the cover. The keys, ivory turned the yellow of old bone, waited. Hammers showed wear, yes, but I'd coaxed music from far worse. Tentatively, I depressed a key, then another, anticipating the familiar thud of a broken action or a muffled tone. Nothing. Utter, absolute silence. As if my fingers pressed not wood and felt, but yielding, soundless rubber. No tremor, no whisper of resonance. I re-examined the strings, taut, correctly positioned. The hammers lifted and fell with perfect mechanical grace. Sound should have bloomed. I rapped the casing with my knuckles. A dull, solid thump answered, dispelling notions of rot or hollowness. The sustain pedal moved smoothly underfoot. With more conviction, I struck a full chord. Still, the void held. Silence, profound and unyielding. It was then that the first tendrils of genuine unease tightened in my chest. The instrument presented no discernible flaw, no physical impediment to its voice. I laid out my tools, the familiar metallic gleam, a small comfort in the oppressive quiet. Tuning pins turned. The action responded to adjustments. The hammer felt seemed adequate. Methodically, I addressed each note, ascending the scale, my ears straining for the subtlest vibration, the faintest harmonic whisper. Only that same suffocating silence answered. I nudged the hammers. They wobbled correctly, but struck the strings with soundless impact. My flashlight beam probed every recess, seeking obstructions, moisture damage, cracks, finding none. Leaning back on the stool, I rubbed tired eyes. I, Elias Thorne, had faced pianos ravaged by flood, fire, and sheer neglect, but never one that looked whole, yet refused utterance. A return trip to the van yielded more specialized gear, including a small digital recorder. Perhaps, I reasoned, some subsonic frequency eluded my ear, a vibration the machine could capture. Positioning the recorder near the harp, I pressed record, then played again. Silence. After a minute, I played back the recording, only the gentle rasp of my own breathing and the distant, mournful sigh of the ocean. Nothing more. The urge to call my contact to confess defeat warred with professional pride. There had to be something overlooked, some hairline fracture, a disconnection hidden deep within its complex anatomy. Lifting the heavy lid, I scrutinized the cast iron harp, dusty but intact, pins secure, strings unbroken. I depressed a key, watching intently as the hammer executed its swift arc, striking the corresponding string, watched it strike, and elicit nothing, not the faintest quiver. It was as if the very physics of sound had been suspended within the confines of this single, obstinate instrument. A clammy dampness bloomed on my palms. Hours bled into one another, marked only by the shifting light through the sea-facing windows. The sun eventually dipped below the horizon, plunging the room into shadow, save for the stark circle cast by the work lamp I'd retrieved from the foyer. The rest of the mansion dissolved into absolute blackness. Outside, the wind moaned, a low, guttural lament, and the ancient timbers of the house groaned in response. I rose, stretching muscles stiff from concentration, rotating my shoulders. In the periphery of my vision, a flicker of movement. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Only the piano, immense and still. A nervous laugh escaped me. Fatigue, surely. Focus, Elias, I admonished myself. Perhaps it was time to consolidate my tools, find a less desolate room, seek a few hours of rest. And then I heard it. A brief, discordant tangle of notes, sharp and unexpected, shattering the silence behind me, like clumsy fingers mashing random keys. My heart leaped, a painful jolt against my ribs. Whirling around, I bathed the piano in light. The keyboard was still, unmoving. I swallowed, the sound loud in my own ears, and crept closer. Everything appeared precisely as I'd left it. No indication that any key had been touched. Rationalizations scrambled in my mind, wind whistling through an unseen flue, a draft stirring the strings. The room possessed no fireplace, and the air remained unnervingly still. Setting up the recorder once more, its red light a tiny, watchful eye, I pressed a few keys myself. Silence. Then turning my back deliberately, I stood motionless, listening. Only the wind, the house's arthritic creaks. After several minutes, I retrieved the recorder and played it back. My breath, a faint electronic hiss, the house settling. Nothing else. I switched it off, the pulse in my temples hammering. That discordant jangle had felt utterly real. With a decisive click, I lowered the fallboard, concealing the keys. Sleep. I needed sleep. Gathering my satchel, I retreated from the room's charged stillness. Upstairs, I found a bedroom marginally less surrendered to dust than the others. The bed, though shrouded, looked structurally sound. Brushing away a worst of the grime, I unrolled my sleeping bag atop the antique mattress cover. My phone alarm was set for the cusp of dawn. Perhaps daylight would lend clarity, reveal some mundane explanation. I woke stiff, a residue of unease clinging to me. The phone's insistent beeping pierced the pre-dawn quiet. 6 a.m. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I saw the first pale light bleeding over the ocean's rim. The hallway was tomb silent. Descending the stairs, I entered the main room. The work lamp sat where I'd left it, but extinguished. Odd. I flicked the switch. It sprang back to life. Had I turned it off? My memory offered no certainty. As I approached the piano, a cold prickle traced my spine. The fallboard was raised. I distinctly recalled closing it. Moving closer, I saw them. Fingerprints, several sets, stark against the yellowed keys, as if left by hands coated in grime or oil. My own hands began to sweat anew. I scanned the dusty floor. Only my footprints disturbed the uniform layer. Pulling out my phone, hands trembling slightly, I photographed the prints. They were clear, undeniable. Gently, I touched a marked key. Still silent. Fetching a clean cloth, I meticulously wiped the keyboard clean, then tried the keys again. Soundless. 6:30 a.m. A hollow ache in my stomach reminded me I hadn't eaten. A brief foray into the kitchen yielded only empty cupboards and the lingering scent of something stale. I sipped water from the bottle I'd brought and returned to the piano room. The sensation of being observed intensified, a palpable pressure on the back of my neck, though the room remained empty. Mid-morning, struck by an idea, I propped my phone on a small tripod, aimed squarely at the piano. I hit record, then deliberately walked out of the room, my footsteps echoing loudly on the aged floorboards. Down the hall, out of sight, I waited for 10 minutes, listening intently. Faint clicking sounds reached me. The house settling, perhaps, or something else. Then, unmistakably, a brief cascade of notes, jumbled, dissonant, sour. It lasted only seconds. My breath hitched. After a pause, I walked back into the room. The piano stood impassive, unchanged. I stopped the recording, rewound, and watched. The video showed the static scene perfectly. The piano, the dust motes dancing in the light shafts. But the audio track held only my departing and returning footsteps, the faint rustle of my jacket. The phantom notes had vanished, leaving no trace on the digital record. I played it again, and again. Silence. The keys on the screen remained perfectly still. Yet, I knew what I had heard. I stood frozen, staring at the instrument, a chill unrelated to the room's temperature seeping into my bones. My mouth was dry parchment. My heartbeat thudded heavily in my throat. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, I moved closer, examining the keys once more. New smudges had appeared, darker this time. I had just wiped them clean. More prints, overlaying the faint residue of the old. Wiping them away again with the cloth, I pressed the keys. Silence. I lifted the lid, checked the hammers, the mechanism. All in order. My hands shook as I drew a tuning hammer from my satchel. I lightly tapped a few strings directly, bypassing the keyboard mechanism. A faint, tinny ping rewarded the effort. So the strings themselves weren't inert. They responded to direct force. Yet the keys remained stubbornly mute. I lost count of the attempts. The sequence repeated until it felt like madness. Press key. Watch hammer strike. Hear nothing. Finally, I straightened, turning away with a sigh of defeat. Behind me, a single, wavering note emerged, thin and reedy, decaying into something that disturbingly resembled a low moan. It hung in the air for less than a second. My throat constricted. I lunged back towards the piano, throwing the lid open wide, desperate to catch the hammers vibrating, the strings quivering, motionless, utterly still. Sweat beaded on my forehead, trickling into my eyes. Enough. I needed air, distance. Retreating outside, I climbed into the van, turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, a reassuringly mundane sound. I sat gripping the wheel, thoughts racing. Flee. Drive away and don't look back. That was instinct. But professionalism, the ingrained habit of solving problems, warred with it. This wasn't a typical malfunction, though. My expertise lay in mechanics and acoustics, not whatever this was. Killing the engine, I stepped back out. I couldn't leave without being able to offer my contact some kind of rational report. I would stay, but only until I could definitively say it was beyond repair by conventional means. That evening, sustenance came from energy bars and lukewarm water. The mansion seemed to draw the darkness into itself, the shadows deepening, acquiring substance. The wind intensified its assault, rattling windows, and the air within grew bitingly cold. I brought my sleeping bag down to the piano room itself. If phenomena occurred, I wanted to witness it directly. My phone, plugged into a portable charger, resumed its silent vigil, recording. I positioned a powerful flashlight within easy reach. Hours crawled by. I drifted in a state between waking and sleep, adrift in the profound quiet. Then, a distorted, clangorous chord ripped through the room, jolting me fully awake. I scrambled upright, snatching the flashlight, its beam spearing the darkness. The light found the piano. Several keys, scattered randomly across the board, were fully depressed, as if under invisible weight. As I watched, breathless, they rose again, slowly, sluggishly, one after the other, with an unnatural delay. I stood rooted, heart hammering. Fumbling, I aimed my phone, trying desperately to capture something, anything. But the screen showed only the static bulk of the instrument, the glare of my light on its polished surface. Checking the video file confirmed it. Darkness, the sound of my own ragged breathing. No notes, no movement of the keys. I lowered the phone, looked back at the piano. Fresh fingerprints marred the keys. The same pattern of smudges, but higher up the keyboard now. Leaning closer, my hand shaking, I saw the impressions clearly. They seemed elongated, the fingertips unnaturally broad. I placed my own hand beside them for comparison. They were larger, significantly larger. Sleep became impossible. The remainder of the night was a tense vigil. Every time a semblance of calm settled, Faint, ephemeral tones would whisper from the piano's direction, ceasing instantly the moment I turned my gaze towards it. My shoulders screamed with tension. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. The house groaned and sighed around me like a dying beast, and with every creak, I expected a shape to coalesce in the doorway, a presence to reveal itself. Nothing appeared but dust motes and dancing shadows. When the gray, exhausted light of morning finally filtered through the tall windows, my nerves felt stripped raw. I stood by the window, gazing at the churning, steel-gray ocean below. Another night here was unthinkable. Methodically, I packed my tools. One last time, I wiped the keys clean, a futile gesture of order against the inexplicable, wanting to leave it outwardly presentable, despite its profound silence. I would contact the agent later, report the instrument fundamentally unsound, plagued by issues beyond the scope of tuning or repair. Let them find someone else, or better yet, let the silent thing remain silent. My job was done. There was no mechanical fault to find, and whatever haunted that piano was not within my purview. Before departing, I made a final circuit, extinguishing the lamps I'd used, closing doors against the drafts that snaked through the halls. Back in the foyer, poised to leave, one final sound reached me from the depths of the house. A single, low note from the piano, guttural and resonant, with a rough, scratching quality, as if played with violent force. I didn't turn back. I didn't want to see if new fingerprints had appeared. I simply walked out, pulling the great door shut behind me. How to articulate the nature of that piano? I still grapple with it. Mechanically flawless. Hammers, strings, pedals, keys, all functioning with precision, yet willfully mute when intentionally played. And the sounds, those phantom chords, the disembodied notes that bloomed only when unobserved, evaporating before any recording device. The fingerprints remain an unsettling enigma. All I possess is the visceral memory of wrongness, the chilling certainty of a presence inhabiting that instrument, a presence that resented my intrusion. As the mansion dwindled in my rearview mirror, eventually swallowed by the coastal haze, a wave of relief, thin but palpable, washed over me. Reaching the main highway felt like surfacing from deep, cold water. I resolved to file my report, strings intact, mechanism responsive, yet fundamentally, inexplicably silent. Issues beyond my solving. The memory of that silent instrument, pregnant with unheard sound, traveled with me. My only solace was the distance growing between us. Silence is my trade, my familiar territory. But not the silence I found in that house on the cliff. May I never cross its threshold again. It began as no more than a flaw in the emulsion, a whisper of darkness clinging to the edge of captured light, a smudge against the cerulean horizon in one frame, a blur bleeding from a shadowed corner in the next. But each photograph I took became a stage for its gradual becoming, the indistinct shape resolving, drawing nearer, sharpening into focus. Before the true nature of this optical parasite dawned on me, the threshold had already been crossed. The thing from the pictures was slipping anchor, drifting into my reality. The genesis was my sister Alara's wedding day. Tasked as the day's informal archivist, I moved through the celebration, my lens seeking those ephemeral moments, champagne laughter bubbling over crystal flutes, The tender orbit of the first dance, a flower girl lost in a vortex of tulle. Sunlight drenched the scene, painting the gardens in hues so vibrant they courted disbelief. A perfect day, almost unnervingly so. Hundreds of exposures accumulated, fleeting glances, clasped hands, the joyous constellation of guests. Later, cocooned in the quiet hum of the night, I began the ritual of review, scrolling through the digital harvest. That's when the anomaly first snagged my attention. There, nestled in the background of a boisterous group portrait, partially veiled by an extravagant spray of lilies, lurked a silhouette vaguely human in its verticality, blurred, indistinct as if caught mid-stride. Yet something felt fundamentally wrong. Proportions subtly skewed, the boundaries too definite, too incised against the softer background. I magnified the area, pixel chasing, but the image fractured, refusing clarity, like trying to grasp smoke. A trick of the aperture, I reasoned, or perhaps an anonymous passerby dissolving at the shutter's click. I let it go. But the stain persisted. It reappeared, and again. A chilling cartography emerged as I navigated the sequence of images. The shape haunted the periphery of nearly every shot. Sometimes a mere rumor of shadow teasing the frame's edge. Other times bolder, a brooding presence behind oblivious smiles, half eclipsed by celebratory debris. A cold current traced my spine. The entity wasn't static. It seemed to develop alongside the day's progression. In the early photographs from the vows, it was little more than an ink blot against the light. By the reception sequence, suggestions of anatomy had surfaced. A hint of a cranium, the slope of shoulders, appendages like stark branches. Exhaustion, I told myself. Late hour, tired eyes conjuring phantoms from photons. I sealed the laptop, seeking refuge in sleep, determined that morning's clarity would dispel the illusion. Sleep, however, offered no sanctuary. Darkness behind my eyelids became a canvas for that encroaching form, each imagined frame rendering it sharper, nearer. My dreams were haunted galleries where shadowed figures perpetually loomed just beyond the focal plane, their unseen gaze a constant pressure. With a tremor of apprehension, I approached the laptop the next morning. A desperate hope flickered. That daylight would expose the figure as mundane, a series of coincidental plays of light and shadow. The hope died instantly. The presence remained, starker now, undeniable. In the later images, features resolved with nightmare precision. Hollows where eyes should reside, a lipless fissure suggesting a mouth, digits elongated and unnaturally sharp. My hands trembled, clicking through the gallery. Each successive photograph documented its relentless advance. It was migrating, deliberately it seemed, pushing through the laughing, unaware celebrants, journeying towards the foreground. The final image I'd captured that day nearly seized my breath. Alara, incandescent in her gown, raising a glass. Directly behind her, no longer obscured or blurred, stood the figure. Fully realized, its visage a grotesque mockery of the human template. One skeletal hand extended, its porcelain-like fingers hovering scant millimeters from my sister's shoulder. I slammed the laptop shut. Air hitched in my throat, panic fluttering like trapped birds. Impossible. Photographs don't morph. Shadow things don't quicken into being, stalking the subjects frozen in time. Yet, the evidence burned behind my eyes. accompanied by a certainty, cold and absolute. This was merely the overture. Weeks bled into an obsession. The wedding photographs became my world, scrutinized for hours, seeking patterns, explanations. I plunged into arcane corners of the internet. Photographic aberrations, spectral intrusions, anything to anchor the impossible. But the deeper I searched, the more the phenomenon metastasized. The figure began to colonize other images, bleeding backwards through my life. Sun-drenched vacation snaps from years ago, casual selfies with friends, even carefully composed portraits. Always lurking initially, then steadily, inexorably, drawing closer. Photography became an act of terror. I ceased taking pictures, taped over my phone's lens, dismantled the gallery walls in my apartment, purging every framed memory. Futile gestures. New images materialized on my devices. Photographs I hadn't taken, depicting the entity within my own home, observing me from the periphery of my workspace, standing sentinel behind my sleeping form. Concern rippled through my circle. Lara, friends. They saw my unraveling. Explanations sounded like madness, I knew. Stress, they offered gently. Sleep deprivation. Perhaps unresolved feelings about Alara moving away post-wedding. To their eyes, the photos remained innocuous, untainted. No lurking dread, no encroaching horror. Doubt began to erode my own conviction. Was I fragmenting? Had reality buckled under some internal pressure? Yet just as I'd persuade myself of a delusion, the evidence would resurface. A flicker of impossible movement in a polished surface. A shadow stretching unnaturally long beside my own. The prickling sensation of being watched in absolute solitude. The culmination arrived one rain-slicked night, walking home from a late shift. The streetlights cast lonely pools on the wet pavement, my footsteps the only sound punctuating the urban quiet. Passing a darkened storefront, I glimpsed it in the reflective void of the window. The figure. No longer confined to the two-dimensional plane, but rendered sharply in the glass, standing directly behind my reflection. I whirled around, heart hammering against my ribs. The street stretched empty behind me, but turning back to the window, it was still there. Closer. Close enough to discern the texture of its surface, like crazed ceramic. Close enough to plumb the abyssal vacancy of its eyes, to witness the lipless mouth stretch into a silent, unending scream. I ran, a primal flight, lungs scorching, legs threatening betrayal. I didn't cease until the deadbolt clicked home in my apartment, every light blazing against the encroaching dark, my body wedged into a corner, as if seeking anchorage against an invisible tide. But sanctuary was an illusion. I felt its presence intensifying, a palpable pressure building within the room. It had traversed the fragile membrane between image and existence. There was no longer anywhere to retreat. Huddled there, trembling, anticipating the inevitable, my phone vibrated against the floorboards. A notification. New photo added. Hands shaking uncontrollably, I unlocked the screen. It was an image of me, taken mere seconds ago. Me, cornered and terrified. And there, coalescing from the deepest shadows behind me, the figure stood, its hand outstretched, the long, pale fingers mere inches from my shoulder. I didn't turn. Couldn't. A chilling lucidity descended. This was the final frame. The revenant from the photographs had hunted me across across timelines, through every captured moment of my life. And now, the chase was concluded. As the cold, smooth touch of something like porcelain grazed my shoulder, a final, detached thought surfaced. I wonder if they'll see it, lurking in the background, when they photograph the scene of my empty apartment. Then the light extinguished, and the ultimate exposure was complete. The sign for Sal's Slice Shack buzzed fitfully against the downpour, its crimson light bleeding across the slick, deserted asphalt like a wound. It stuttered, a failing pulse in the wet dark. 11:47 blinked on the car's console. One last run, Leo thought, exhaling slow. Then, oblivion till morning. 6 months he'd been piloting this beat-up sedan for Sal, shuttling cardboard circles of cheese and dough to fund the relentless march of tuition. No glory in it, just the steady tick of the meter and the occasional generous tip. Predictable. Mostly. Beside him, the pizza box exhaled warmth, a fragile pocket of comfort against the night. The destination scribbled on the ticket was Terra Incognita, dangling off the frayed edge of their delivery map. A prickle of unease surfaced as he navigated the car out of the lot, a current beneath the surface of the ordinary. Rain hammered the windshield, thick as thrown gravel, overwhelming the frantic slap of the wipers. Streets bled into narrower lanes, houses thinning out, replaced by dripping skeletal trees. His phone's map guided him toward a turnoff swallowed by darkness, a gravel path nearly consumed by encroaching woods. Branches scraped the car's flanks like fingernails as he crept forward, the path twisting deeper into shadow. Abruptly, the trees relented, revealing a house hunched against the storm. It was a wreck, paint peeling, windows like vacant eyes, save for a solitary yellow square high on the second floor. He cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the drumming rain. The pizza, clutched in his hand, felt suddenly cool, its heat leaching into the damp air. Each step onto the porch groaned a protest under his weight. He lifted a hand to knock, but the door yawed inward before his knuckles met wood. The figure framed in the doorway froze him, tall, gaunt, draped in shadow, with a thicket of beard and eyes that seemed to strip away pretense. A stained undershirt clung to his frame. His jeans were artifacts of wear. Leo took an instinctive step back. "Delivery," Leo managed, his voice thin, offering the box like a shield. A grin stretched the man's lips, sharp and mirthless. "Spot on!" The voice rumbled, low and gravelly. "Bring it in, why don't you? Wallet's upstairs." Every cell screamed retreat, back to the car, engine roaring, tires spitting gravel. But the specter of Sal's disappointment, the potential loss of this paycheck lifeline, held him rooted. Against the frantic pulse in his throat, he crossed the threshold. Inside, darkness clung thick with stale smoke, and an acrid metallic tang that curled his nostrils. The man, Silas, gestured him through a cramped hallway, towards what might have been a living room under better circumstances. "Set her down there." He pointed a long finger at a coffee table drowning in empty cans and overflowing ashtrays. noise. Be right back. Gotta fetch the cash. Silas vanished up a set of stairs that whined under his ascent, leaving Leo adrift in the dim, suffocating space. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat. Eyes darting, searching for an escape route. They snagged on something in the far corner, half concealed by a threadbare armchair. A dark canvas duffel bag, carelessly unzipped. Protruding from the opening was the unmistakable, cold gleam of a gun barrel. Ice sluiced through Leo's veins. This wasn't eccentricity. This was danger, sharp and immediate. He had to leave. Now. He turned, but the heavy tread on the stairs announced Silas's return. Panic clamped down. Act normal. Don't let him see the fear. Silas reappeared, clutching a messy fold of bills. Here you go, son. He rasped, extending the money. Keep it. Leo's hand trembled as he took the cash. That's when he saw them. Dark, crusty stains blooming across Silas's knuckles. Stains that looked unnervingly like dried blood. Right. Thanks. Leo choked out. Night. He pivoted, forcing his legs into a steady rhythm, though every instinct shrieked, run. The front door was agonizingly close. Then he heard it, a dull thump from above, followed by a choked sound, quickly stifled. Silas's hand clamped onto Leo's shoulder, a grip like forged iron. Here's something, kid. Leo shook his head, unable to trust his voice. Eyes fixed on the door. Sanctuary, just inches away. Good, Silas breathed, the word laced with menace. 'Cause there ain't nothing to hear. Best get on home now. Laid out. Roads ain't safe. He practically propelled Leo out onto the porch, the door slamming shut with violent finality. Leo stumbled down the steps, legs watery. Reaching the car, his fingers fumbled desperately with the keys, shaking too hard to find the ignition. As he jammed the car into reverse, headlights swept the house one final time. Framed in the upstairs window, stark against the gloom, was a face. A woman's, pale, eyes wide with terror, mouth stretched in a scream that made no sound. He slammed the accelerator, tires churning gravel, fishtailing onto the main road. His mind spun a vortex of images. The gun, the stained knuckles, the silent scream in the window. The pieces clicked into a horrifying whole. Police. He needed to call police. Reaching for his phone, doubt gnawed at him. What if he'd misread everything? Overactive imagination. He could lose his job, face trouble for a false alarm. He pulled sharply onto the shoulder, the engine idling raggedly. His hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles white islands in the dim interior light. Drive back to Sal's. Pretend the night was just another rain-soaked delivery. Or make the call that could save a life. It wasn't a choice. Not really. He dialed 911, his voice a ragged tremor as he relayed the address, the gun, the face. The dispatcher's calm voice instructed him to proceed to the nearest station and wait. The hours that followed dissolved into a haze of fluorescent lights, lukewarm coffee and repeated questions. He recounted everything: the unsettling drive, Silas, the glimpse of the weapon, the blood, the woman trapped behind the glass. They listened intently, the address clearly resonating. Dawn was breaking when the full picture emerged. Silas, they told him, was a phantom they'd been hunting across 3 states, linked to a trail of vanishings. The raid confirmed their worst fears, uncovering grim evidence. And the woman, alive, captive in an upstairs room. Another day, perhaps even hours, and Leo's delivery might have been her last. The weeks after were a strange whirlwind. More questions from solemn-faced detectives, a formal commendation, tentative inquiries from local news crews. Sal gave him a raise, offered indefinite time off. Yet, as the ripples subsided, the night remained indelible. The dying neon, the relentless rain, the spectral face. It played behind his eyelids when he tried to sleep. He kept the job, though. Delivering pizzas felt altered now, imbued with a strange gravity. Each anonymous door could hide anything. Each transaction held a sliver of potential, a chance encounter that mattered. Pulling up to unfamiliar houses, knocking on doors belonging to strangers, he felt it keenly. The razor-thin membrane between the mundane and the momentous, between just another delivery and the night everything changed. Sometimes the most profound turning points arrive disguised as the utterly ordinary. Sometimes it's just a pizza delivery, until it isn't. Midnight clenched Ashford Falls, a hamlet swallowed by forest in the looming shoulders of mountains, and the asphalt unfurled before me like a ribbon of obsidian slicked with relentless rain. A visit to Alara, 2 towns distant, had bled deep into the night. Home beckoned, the solace of my own bed, yet the heavens wept furiously, transforming the highway into a treacherous, glistening path. Emptiness reigned. Only my headlights carved a tunnel through the downpour, flanked by sentinel pines dripping shadows. The wipers, frantic metronomes at maximum velocity, fought a losing battle, barely cleaving arcs through the blinding curtain of water. My knuckles were white mountains on the steering wheel's landscape as I strained to decipher the fleeting hieroglyphs of the dashed lines. Then, rounding a sharp curve, my beam snagged on something alien at the roadside. A silhouette. Instinct slammed my foot onto the brake. The car fishtailed slightly on the slick surface, my pulse leaping into my throat. Squinting through the torrent, I saw him. A man poised just beyond the shoulder, where the tarmac bled into the dense woods. Drenched, face obscured by shadow and rain, he offered no gesture, no plea for aid. Motionless as a cairn at the forest's verge, he simply stood, a sentinel of the storm, his gaze fixed, unnervingly intent. A tremor of indecision ran through me, my fingers tap-tapping a nervous rhythm on the wheel. Every primal instinct screamed, "Drive. Go now. Don't look back." Yet his sheer stillness, his utter isolation in that tempestuous void, pricked at some buried node of empathy. Stranded. Hurt. The questions gnawed. I lowered the window a fraction, a compromise between caution and conscience, the rain instantly misting the interior. "Hey, everything all right out there?" Silence answered, save for the drumming deluge. He remained rooted, a statue carved from night and water. Though details were lost to the downpour, his focus felt absolute, laser-like. An inexplicable chill permeated the car's manufactured warmth. Unlatching the door felt unthinkable, stepping out into that void even more so. But the guilt persisted. Need a lift. My voice, louder this time, strained for a nonchalance I didn't feel. He moved, one step deliberate, ponderous, his shoe splashing audibly in a hidden puddle. My grip on the wheel became a stranglehold. My heart hammered against my ribs. Closer now, the headlight beams illuminated a face of lunar pallor, gaunt, utterly devoid of expression. His eyes, sunken and dark, seemed not to see me but to pierce through me. Please, the word emerged, barely a sigh above the storm's roar. Just into town. An icicle of dread traced its path along my vertebrae at the flat, hollow timbre of his voice. Yet I suppressed it. Leaving him here felt like a transgression I couldn't stomach. Okay, I managed, the words steadier than the hand reaching for the lock. Hop in. He pulled the passenger door open, and a wave of cold, damp air surged into the cabin, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else. Something faintly sour and unsettling that churned my stomach. He folded himself into the seat, dripping onto the upholstery, his gaze locked forward. The door thudded shut, closing us in a sudden, suffocating intimacy. A sideways glance confirmed my unease. Up close, his strangeness intensified, the skin unnaturally pale, as if bleached of life, framed by dark, bruised-looking hollows beneath his eyes. Waterlogged clothes clung to a skeletal frame. His hands rested in his lap, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles shone white. Whereabouts in town? I asked, aiming for casual, needing the mundane. Just keep driving, he replied, his voice a monotone, devoid of inflection. A cold knot tightened in my gut. I eased the car back onto the blacktop, the rain pounding the roof like insistent fists. What had I invited into this small, sealed space? Anger him? No, best not. The ensuing silence was a physical presence. Thick, heavy, charged. I could feel the weight of his scrutiny, even as he stared straight ahead. Focusing on the treacherous road became an act of will, ignoring the frantic tempo of my own heart, a near impossibility. Minutes stretched, taut as wires. The quiet became unbearable. Clearing my throat, I forced the words out. So, car trouble? Or... No immediate reply. He continued his unnerving contemplation of the rain-lashed windshield. Finally, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes, cold voids in the dim light, found mine. I was waiting, he breathed, the words barely audible. A shiver danced across my skin. Waiting? For what? For you. I swallowed hard against a sudden dryness in my throat. My hands clamped the wheel, the plastic groaning faintly. His meaning eluded me, or perhaps I refused to grasp it. Drive. Just drive. Keep eyes forward. The rain intensified, blurring the world outside into streaks of gray and black. The wipers swept frantically, inadequate. A furtive glance confirmed his posture. Still, face an unreadable mask. Stop the car. demand he get out. Some invisible force held me paralyzed, trapped in the momentum, in the suffocating silence. His voice, when it came again, was low, measured, chillingly calm. You should have left me there. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? He pivoted fully in the seat, his gaze boring into me, intense and inescapable. You should have driven past. You shouldn't have stopped. Panic flared, hot and sharp. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I had to regain control. Taking a ragged breath, I tried to keep the tremor from my voice. Look, maybe it's best if I just let you out here. Before the sentence finished, his hand shot across the console, clamping onto my forearm. The grip was astonishingly strong, a band of ice-cold steel. His skin felt clammy, wrung, the fingers digging into muscle with bruising force. No, he stated, the word flat, absolute. You can't leave now. Terror seized me, raw and suffocating. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Trapped. That's what I was. His grip felt unbreakable. His eyes, inches from mine, held a darkness that seemed to drink the light, promising... What? I couldn't fathom it. Didn't want to. Let go, I stammered, the plea thin and reedy. He didn't relent, didn't even blink. His breath, cool and stale, ghosted across my cheek. The car filled with the cloying miasma of dampness and that sour undertone. You're going to take me where I need to go, he declared, a low, menacing rumble. And then you can leave. A choked nod was my only response. My mind raced, seeking an escape, any escape, but finding only the dead end of his unyielding presence. Stay calm. Placate him. All right, I whispered, the sound barely escaping my constricted throat. Where you need to go, I'll take you. Slowly, deliberately, he released my arm, settling back against the seat. But his gaze remained locked on me, a tangible weight. I could feel the imprint of his cold fingers on my skin. Forcing my trembling hands to obey, I drove onward, deeper into the rain-lashed night. The road seemed endless, a black maw swallowing us whole. The rhythmic drumming on the roof became the beat of my own frantic pulse. An eternity later, measured in heartbeats and shallow breaths, he spoke again, the whisper barely cleaving the silence. Stop here. I scanned the surroundings. Nothing. Just the impenetrable wall of trees, spectral shapes dissolving into the Stygian gloom. Here. Are you sure? The question quavered. He nodded, his attention fixed on some unseen point in the darkness beyond the roadside. With trembling hands, I guided the car onto the sodden shoulder. He reached for the door handle, his movements unnervingly fluid. He unfolded himself from the car, stepping back into the downpour, a figure dissolving into the night. He stood there, facing not the woods, but me, waiting, watching. I didn't hesitate. My hand slammed the lock button, my foot crushed the accelerator. The tires spun, spitting mud and gravel, before finding purchase. The car surged forward, leaving him behind. I refused the urge to look in the rearview mirror, terrified of confirming he was still there, a fixed point in the swirling chaos. Yet, as the miles dissolved behind me, the oppressive sense of his gaze lingered, a cold pressure on the back of my neck. And now, whenever the night deepens, whenever rain drums against the glass, I see him. That drenched silhouette at the edge of the known world, waiting patiently for the next compassionate fool to stop. The script scrawled across the note froze the marrow in my bones. Instantly recognizable, that chaotic tangle of letters had plagued our doorstep for weeks. This time, however, the violation wasn't external. It defiled my own bedroom mirror, smeared in something horribly resembling gore. I know your dreams. Just 3 months prior, we'd claimed the old farmstead. Eleanor and I, Julian, had chased the rural fantasy for years, yearning to shed the city's relentless hum. This place, 20 acres sprawling wild, a sentinel house weathered by the 19th century, offered at a price whispering of unseen flaws, proved an irresistible lure. We should have listened to that whisper. Those initial weeks unfolded like a sun-drenched reverie. Days bled into fixing sagging porch steps, navigating thigh-high grasses in forgotten fields, bathing in a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. Gone were the blaring horns, the keening sirens. Only wind sighing through ancient oaks, and the distant lowing of neighboring cattle punctuated the stillness. At night, the cosmos blazed with an intensity that stole your breath. Then, the missives began. The first, innocuous, a slip of paper beneath the welcome mat. Good walls. We shrugged it off. A neighbor, perhaps, despite the script's unsettling crudeness, like a child gripping a pen too tightly. Days later, another rested on the porch swing. Best to bolt your evenings shut. A prickle of unease. Our doors were always bolted. That night I tested each lock twice, thrice, a cold knot forming low in my gut. The notes persisted, materializing in places that defied logic. Nestled beneath a clay planter, perched on our second-floor balcony railing, pinned to a skeletal oak at the property's far edge, even slipped inside. The frame of our bedroom window. Each message twisted the knife deeper. I admire your watching. Eleanor sleeps beautifully. Closer now. Naturally, we involved the constabulary. Officers arrived, their boots crunching on gravel, took down our fractured narrative, yet unearthed nothing tangible. No latent prints, no disturbed earth, no rational explanation for entry into a secured home. A prank, they concluded, some local youths testing boundaries. Install cameras, they advised. We did far more. Security became my obsession. Digital eyes monitoring every angle, motion detectors guarding the perimeter, piercing alarms wired to every conceivable entry point. Floodlights were positioned to bleach the darkness from every square inch of our land. I even acquired a firearm, a thing whose very presence I'd once abhorred. But terror has a way of eroding conviction. A deceptive calm settled. The notes ceased. Tentatively, we allowed ourselves to breathe, persuading each other it had merely been a twisted game played by bored teenagers. Until the night I confronted the message on our looking glass. I stood transfixed, my thoughts refusing to coalesce around the impossible reality. How? How had entry been gained? Alarms, cameras, fortified locks. I'd performed my nightly ritual, checking each with obsessive diligence before we succumbed to sleep. Beside me, Eleanor murmured, shifting in her slumber. With frantic haste, I erased the crimson smear before her eyes could open to it. The earlier notes had frayed her nerves to ribbons. This would sever them completely. The remainder of that night I spent hunched over monitors, spooling through hours of security feeds, scrutinizing every sensor log. Silence. Emptiness. No flicker of movement, no tripped alarms. The message might as well have precipitated from the humid night air. Morning brought another call, another police visit. This time their demeanor shifted, the earlier dismissal replaced by a palpable gravity. They combed the house meticulously, dusted surfaces again, questioned the few neighbors scattered across the miles. Still, emptiness yielded emptiness. "Listen," the lead detective finally stated, his gaze level and somber. "This level of access, it's aberrant. Whoever this is, they're beyond simple mischief. You need to consider finding somewhere else, at least for a time." But where? Every last scent resided within these cursed walls. Besides, a core of fury pulsed beneath the fear. This was our sanctuary. No phantom, no lunatic would dispossess us. We remained. I took leave from work, transforming into a sentry, patrolling our acreage with the cold weight of the gun, a constant companion, nerves jangling at every rustle of leaves, every creak of old timber. Eleanor became a ghost in her own home, sleep-starved, her gaze perpetually darting towards shadows. Arguments erupted, raw and frequent, unlike anything in our decade together, the relentless pressure gnawing at the foundations of our love. And the notes continued their insidious campaign, appearing in ever more baffling locations. Inside a locked desk drawer, centered on our freshly made bed, etched into the bark of a maple I'd sworn was unmarked just hours before. We escalated our defenses, tripwires strung low, additional cameras peering from hidden eaves, even fine layers of flour dusted across thresholds, hoping for a single print. Futile. It was like wrestling smoke, like battling an unseen tide. Weeks dissolved into a blur of hypervigilance. My reflection showed a gaunt stranger, haunted by sleeplessness, dark crescents blooming beneath my eyes. Eleanor spoke of fleeting shapes glimpsed peripherally, of hushed susurrations in unoccupied rooms. I feared for her sanity. I feared for my own. Then, the night that shattered everything. Eleanor's scream ripped me from a shallow doze. I surged upright, hands scrabbling for the pistol on the nightstand. Dim moonlight painted a figure at the foot of our bed. Tall, impossibly slender, its limbs possessing an unsettling elongation. I leveled the gun, my hand vibrating so violently, the sight picture blurred. "Leave!" The word tore from my throat, a pathetic attempt at bravado. "Leave now, or I shoot." Slowly, it pivoted. My heart seized. The face. Dear God, the face. It defied earthly description. Pallid, almost luminous skin stretched taut over an unnaturally extended cranium. Eyes vast, obsidian pools devoid of white. And the mouth, a lipless fissure bisecting the lower face, pulled into a ghastly rictus mimicking a smile. I fired. The report slammed against the confines of the room. The figure recoiled minutely as the round struck, yet it did not fall. Instead, it laughed. A high, ululating sound that scraped raw against my nerves. Then it surged forward, a blur of impossible speed. I felt talons. Yes, talons. Tear across my chest. A scream ripped from me as I discharged the weapon again, blindly, futilely, like trying to halt mist with bullets. Eleanor's screams continued, yet sounded distant, muffled. Everything receded except the searing pain, and those abyssal eyes locking onto mine. How long the assault lasted remains uncertain, an eternity compressed into heartbeats. Abruptly, the pressure vanished. Blinking through a haze of pain and terror, I saw it standing near the window, a stark silhouette against the bruised pre-dawn sky. It regarded us one final time, and I could have sworn that lipless mouth stretched wider. Then, with a speed that fractured perception, it was simply gone. The police responded inevitably. They documented the splintered wood where bullets impacted, photographed the ragged furrows across my chest. But beyond that, nothing. No foreign fibers, no anomalous DNA, nothing to corroborate the presence of a third party. They suspect madness, a shared psychosis born of stress and isolation, that we inflicted this upon ourselves. Perhaps believing them would offer a perverse sort of comfort. We didn't spend another night in that house. We couldn't. Gathering only what bare hands could carry, we fled with the morning light, abandoning the remainder of our lives within those walls. Now, we drift. Hotels, motels, transient rentals, never settling, forever scanning peripheries, perpetually anticipating the next note. Because they haven't stopped entirely. Infrequent, yes, but appearing often enough to affirm its continued existence, its unwavering observation, its patient waiting. What is it? Abomination, specter, demon. Does the label even signify? Its reality is undeniable, its fixation unbroken. Sometimes in the deepest hours of night, a tall, reed-thin shadow seems to flicker just beyond the glass, or I catch a fleeting glimpse of unnaturally dark eyes staring from a passing crowd. And I'm left to wonder, how long can this flight endure? How long until watching ceases to be enough? If these words find you, heed their warning. Should you stumble upon a haven that feels too perfect, too serendipitous, question its truth. And if cryptic messages begin to appear, delivered by impossible means, flee. Flee without hesitation, without a backward glance. Some watchers, once their gaze fixes upon you,